Hello there, Zoe here. Welcome to the channel. In this video, I will be showing you how to instantly trigger an Integromat action the second something changes in their Airtable database. So this is a little bit different than using a search or using a watch. We are going to use a webhook. In the previous video, I demonstrated how to create an event to send a record to Airtable via a button click on a record. But now we're going to do it without a button click, with just an action happening in that database that triggers the Integromat webhook. So to get started, in this sample database here, Sales CRM, which is just a default template you can download from Airtable and use, I basically I'm on the opportunities table and we've got a bunch of statuses here. So we're going to say, for this example, anytime a status goes to closed one, we want to send the team a text message letting them know that the state is closed one and they can take over the account and do what they need to do. All right. So basically the workflow would be, I'm a worker, I'm in my database. Oh, cool. This has gone past negotiation. This is closed one. Boom. The second that happens, I want instantly Airtable to trigger. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to go here to Integromat. Now, it's worth noting that that can be done with a watch, and it also can be done with a search. The difference is, with a watch, you need to trigger that to happen in intervals. So with a watch, it's basically telling Integromat to check Airtable for the change every 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, every hour, 24 hours a day, and each of those is going to tick down your operations. It's not a ton, but it's not necessarily efficient, and it's not in real time. So if you want something real time, you're going to have to use a webhook, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to go ahead and delete this, and let's go to our Sales CRM. So let's see here. What we're going to do first is, for this example, we're going to create a view. There are other ways to do this, but we're going to create a view, and I'll kind of explain why. But so let's just get the view created first. This will be an automation view. You can hide these if you have a lot of views that are going to be based on automations. You could make the view like user specific, so only you see those by default. But we're going to call this automation closed one notification. So our next step is we're going to go over here to automations, and we're going to click on create a custom automation, and we're going to call this closed one webhook. And I'm going to say the trigger type is going to be when a record enters a view. Now, I could say when a record is updated, but I only want to trigger this during a closed one status. So I'm not going to do record updated, but you could say if record is updated, and then I could say opportunities, and I could say field and select the field here of status, right? And so that would trigger that, but it's going to trigger it on all of these stages, and I only want to trigger it when it's closed one, right? So actually, let me go back here and let me delete this. In closed one view, I'm going to filter this where status is closed one. All right. So only thing that's going to happen is basically what I'm going to say is, sorry, I should have done that before. Automation. So I'm going to say when a record is, and you could also do when a record matches condition, but just in case the record might match that condition multiple times, we're just going to do it when it enters a view. Well, I guess technically that could happen the same. All right, I'm digressing. So anyways, let's go to opportunities. We're going to select a view. I'm going to call this closed one. I'm going to run this test. Great. My very next action is going to be run a script. I'm going to cut and paste this script. It's slightly different than the script I wrote before. All right. I will include this script in a link in the video notes. So for webhook here, basically the only thing you're going to change is webhook. I'll show you what to change. So let's go here. We're going to go to webhooks, custom webhook. I'm going to create a new webhook called test 3. You're going to want good names for your webhooks. This is just for demo purposes. And here's my test webhook. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And actually, I need to copy this URL. I'm going to come in here and paste that URL. And for my query parameter, I'm going to just pass in the record ID. Now, how I pass in the record ID is I'm just going to click add input variable. I'm going to call this record ID. Value record insert Airtable record ID. And so basically this creates a variable called record ID, and the value of that variable is whatever record triggered this step. And then that becomes available to me right here. So input config.record ID. So I'm basically running a function to get an object, and then the dot notation record ID for that object is going to be passed as ID query params, as an ID query parameter. So that's what'll be passed. If I run the test here, and I go to my sales CRM, right? Let's do a little side by side. And I test this. It's going to trigger my webhook. So now you'll see my webhook pass the record ID. Now, you could also pass in other data. So, for instance, priorities here. Let's say I wanted to pass in priority. I could edit this code and say priority value is going to be priority name, and I want this trimmed, and now I just need to do and $ curly bracket input config dot priority curly bracket, and priority equals. So let's test that again. And you'll see that it passed the record ID and it also passed priority equals very high. So if I run this again, it's going to say there's an unprocessed bundle, because Integromat will store webhooks. So if your webhook goes down or there's an error somehow, it'll just keep a queue of those webhooks. So I'm going to process existing, and you'll notice here I now have the ID and the priority of very high that is coming over from here. So that's it. In essence, you can trigger. It happens instantly. So we'll run a quick test here. So you'll see, let's go over to all opportunities again, and we're going to run this, and then I'm going to change negotiation to closed one, and then basically that's it. We'll just wait a second. And it's not going to do anything because I forgot to turn my automation on. So if I go here, I turn my automation on, which is, can't forget to do that. Now, if I run this, and we'll go negotiation, closed one. There you go. It was instantly triggered. So from here, you have your record ID. So potentially I could go back in Airtable. I could get a record, and that's the record ID. So I could just pass it this ID if I wanted to, and then get that record and then do whatever I want to do in my automation at this point on. Or I have the other variable. I could very well use this variable. So you could very well have an email address or a phone number or whatever other metadata that you want, or you could pass multiple variables and you wouldn't even have to do this Airtable step. You could just trigger this webhook with the payload from Airtable and do whatever automation you want. All right, so there we go. That is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any comments at all, I'd love feedback. You can throw a comment on the video down below. Or if there's any other type of videos that you'd want to see, let me know what you're looking to see, and I'll see what I can do to get that created for you. So thanks for watching the video. Be sure to follow if you enjoy this type of content.